because Kamala Harris said, I'm trying to do everything to get a ceasefire. And then they turn around and fund Israel.
Oh, yeah.
You want to talk about those contradictions?
Oh, sure. And it wasn't just Kamala Harris, it was AOC who was,
Right,
you know,
right.
like trying to clear the ground for her, and promising that Joe Biden and then Kamala Harris were working diligently day and night for a ceasefire, and we know absolutely not. Gaza and the genocide in Gaza and the slavish support for Israel, the Israel first policy that's been adopted by both Democrats and Republicans for a long, long time. It's historic as well as current. It's all really kind of a microcosm of what is wrong with the empire. And Gaza is kind of it's like the horrific expression of empire kind of in its most clear-cut brutality. And this is being funded enthusiastically. Some say it's 22 billion, but others like Stephen Semler, who has a really great newsletter called Polygraph, excuse me, he says it's actually more like 38 billion over the last two years or so. 38 billion thrown into weapons to defend Israel and basically to conduct a regional war on behalf of Israel, to allow Israel to expand into its kind of
Right, right.
so-called biblical, yeah.
Let's back up because you
Yeah.
said to defend Israel. And that right there seems to be oxymoron.
Oh, totally, because it's Israel that's really on the offensive, that's attacking, almost as many countries as the U.S., between Syria, Lebanon, Iran, begging for the war with Iran, Israel and Yemen. It's just one after another. Israel is completely on the offensive. And here we are. The reason that Gaza is such a beautiful, and tragic symbol of U.S. foreign policy and really of empire is that the whole military killing machine that Gaza represents, we are paying for. It's not only the tragedy of Gaza, it's the tragedy here at home that empire is conducting a war on working people, on African Americans, on Latinos, on trans people, on all, vulnerable and marginalized sectors of the community. There's a war going on at home with the same militarism and the police brutality going on here at home. And the point I most want to make right now is that this is costing us half of our discretionary budget. So why is it that 22, 24 million people are looking at their healthcare premiums skyrocket under the ACA, the so-called Affordable Care Act, so-called care, it's the Unaffordable Uncaring Act. Those payments are skyrocketing such that an elderly couple could see an increase of some $80,000. I mean, it's just like mind-boggling how much.
80,000 increase? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, let me double check that because that just sounds unbelievable. It might be 20,000. Maybe
Either
I'm
one is bad.
either one is just unthinkable, but I'm going to check that because I did like take that down
Well,
as like,
$20,000, okay. I think I can just, write a check.
right, you can afford that. And besides, even people who paid their healthcare premiums, they still can't afford their healthcare, and our health is absolutely going to the dogs. So, Gaza is really, and the genocide in Gaza is a microcosm of how empire is, it's just, hitting us in every dimension of our lives. It's not working. And Gaza is, and this slavish service dedication to Israel is unbelievable. We can criticize our own government, some of the time at least, but you can't utter a peep in criticism of Israel. And I will say, as someone of Jewish background myself, Judaism is not Zionism. And it is Zionism that is being taken
Thank
to
you.
here, which is racism. Let's just be clear about it. Any, any ethnicity that only wants to protect itself, you can't do that. You have to end racism across the board. You can't
And
just,
how could that be a so-called democracy, which I've heard the so-called liberals on stations say it's a democracy?
yeah.
It's just insane.
And it's like Israel claims to be the most moral army, the most moral army and the only moral army and the only democracy in the Middle East. Well, I'm sorry, if you are assassinating children by shooting them in the head, and we have very clear testimony from healthcare providers that you see a whole rash of kids coming in, and one week they have gunshot to the head, the next week it's gunshots to the chest. This is target practice. It's a video game that's being played by the Israeli occupation forces. And the scary thing is that they are now training for some time now, really for at least the last decade. You've had these collaborations between the Israeli occupation forces and our local police, especially in the cop cities, especially invading and terrorizing African American communities and other communities of color. You have these tactics, which are now being normalized across our police forces that are absolutely devastating, and which we have the Israelis to thank, which is why, one of the sayings out there is that as Gaza goes, we all go. That includes the AI, that includes the targeting, that includes the robotic weaponry and the drones that have been developed and tested on Gazans. These are also being used on the border, but it's not limited here in the U.S. It's not limited just to the border. This is becoming the new normal.
Right. And what you mentioned was true. The IDF is supposed to be training these cop cities. And we heard a lot about the cop city in Atlanta, but now I don't hear too much about it. And that brings me to a point
Yeah.
I'd like you to discuss. And that is that the corporate media and money can make you visible or invisible. And I think you realized that when you did your campaign, and they wanted to make you invisible. In other words, Trump succeeded because they made him visible. You cut on the TV, there he was. They don't talk about policy. And my thing to people is we have to look at policy more than people. For instance, the Green Party, political reform. I'm reading some of their introductory points. Political reform,
Yeah.
electoral reform, voting rights, ballot access. That's policy. So I try to look at policy rather than reform. But you running, realize people say, some friend of mine said, where's Jill Stein, in a sarcastic way? Where's Jill Stein? I said, I don't know. You have to ask her. But
You have to ask the corporate media is who you have to ask.
right,
That is the
right.
question.
Yeah.
Where is corporate media? That is the Green Party, in the last elections here in this off year, we had over 100 candidates who were actually elected to local office, everything from mayors to city councilors and school committees and rent control boards. We are, that is really our major focus as the Green Party is local politics and running people from the grassroots up. And we actually do rather well. Over half of our incumbents were elected as well as the new crop. Something like 57% actually won their races. So we have a lot to talk about in terms of local elections. And they're absolutely terrified. They had their war room, the Democratic National Committee was very proud of their war room, which was intended to basically disappear and smear their opposition. They spent more money on the effort to silence and smear us than we spent on our entire campaign. In fact, It wasn't more, it was about 10 times more. So, yeah, that's absolutely what they do. And in fact, I heard from some some of the media that did cover us, that they had received talking points and gotcha questions that the DNC wanted the reporter to ask
And I
me.
want to make it clear that was on KBLA here in Los Angeles. You might have had other experiences too with Tavis Smiley, because I
That's
think we
right.
talked
That's
about
right.
that night. So they called him in the middle of the night and go ahead with your story, saying, "Hey, this is what you can ask and not ask."
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Right.
Amazing,
It
amazing.
is incredible. Yes, this is the democracy. It's the best democracy that money
Money
can.
can buy.
Yeah,
and,
and I
and
want to I want to quote what was his name? Louis Brandeis, who was a Supreme Court justice, I think around the turn of the 19th and 20th century. So he goes way back, but even then it was it was not a new it's not a new problem now. And what he said kind of summarizes it in a really nice way, which is that we have a choice between democracy or vast concentrations of wealth. You can't have both. We have vast concentrations of wealth, which enable us, us, not, I don't mean us, I mean our political elites are enabled to control the dialogue, to buy their way into this pay for play politics that Donald Trump is particularly, overt about, but it didn't start with Donald Trump. This has been very long in coming. There was a great statistic I heard the other day on PBS NewsHour, which I watch mostly to keep an eye on the opposition, corporate media, I'm afraid. They do have there's some good exceptions and some, good reporting that they do, but they do an
yeah,
awful lot of the Department of Defense talking points. I have to say, listening to their foreign policy analysis is really disturbing. But they had a great statistic that from some study, I don't recall who did it offhand, but what they found was that the 100 richest people in the US contributed over $1 billion to the 2024 federal elections.
wow. Would you repeat
President and
that
Congress.
again?
Take the 100 richest people in the US. 100 people gave over $1 billion to this system of legalized bribery. So it's no wonder that we're seeing the policies that we see. You go back to 2004, so like go back 20 years, the amount that they contributed at that time it was somewhere around 30 million, roughly, give or take 10 million. But it was a large sum even then, but now it's not measured in tens of millions. It's like billion plus that 100 people are feeding into the election system in order to buy it off. It's just chilling to think that this is what has been legalized now.
Money is, I think, one of the things we have to do is get money out of the politics. And I think that was on your platform, you being
Absolutely.
part of the
Yes.
Green Party platform on foreign policy, authorization of use of military forces, authorization of the use, if you even need it. I mean, why do we even need this huge military budget? When was the last time the United States was attacked?
Yeah.
Any formidable
Well, I
opponent?
think it was the Second World War. I think it was Pearl Harbor.
Right.
Uh,
But they use this, for all, it's
oh,
just,
it's absolutely outrageous.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna put,
and how much was that authorization for the use of military force? It was for just shy of $1 billion. And if you add to that the authorizations outside of that, it's easily $1 trillion, which is more than 50% of our discretionary budget, is now being spent on, death and destruction around the world, which comes back to bite us.
mm,
The U.S. foreign policy is called, they have a name for it, full spectrum dominance. That was the name given to it by under George Bush.
right.
Full spectrum dominance, meaning that the US will dominate in every sector of the economy and resources and transit pathways and all that markets, the US will dominate everywhere all the time. That is the declared policy of the US. We will be top dog, bar none. But that doesn't, conform to reality, as you were saying at the very beginning. What's actually happening is that the BRICS alliance
Ooh,
of China, India, Russia, Brazil, and like 15 other countries now that have basically joined on. They not only have a majority of the world's population, they now have exceeded substantially the US sector of the global economy. So we are losing ground fast. We used to be 50% of the global economy after the Second World War, and we're now 15%. So we're going down like this, and the global South is kind of coming up like that. So we're not going to be top dog for long, or we really aren't anymore. We're pretending that we are, but that illusion is crashing and burning. And the point here being that as we, the US and Israel, destroy the whole framework of international law and human rights, this comes back to bite us. Who's going to protect us when the next hegemon wants our resources and wants our water and so on? What's to stop them when there's another force that's more powerful than ours? So,
interesting. And,
we
and
need we need that framework.
if that's even the case, because see, you mentioned something that they're the top dog, and they think in those terms as far as we're the best, we're number one, rather than looking at cooperation, they look at competition. Like China's the enemy. Because what? Because China's doing infrastructure, not putting bases everywhere? Or Russia's the enemy because they're trying to defend themselves from being invaded and overtaken too? So why we have to get out of this mentality of, USA, we're number one. We need to be cooperate, not
Exactly.
try to be the dominant for, and why? But that's the whole, I think, structure that the United States was built on. But anyway, we're talking to Dr. Jill Stein, former candidate for the President of the United States for the Green Party.
Right.
We'd like you to also join in, you being the listeners. If you want to ask Dr. Stein any questions, you can call us at 818-985-5735, 818-985-5735, and hit option 1 to join the conversation. And then later on in the program, we will have Nefta Freeman. He's going to give us an update on what happened in bombing in Nigeria. There's some other things that happened this year. We're going over the year. So I'm going to just say them, and then you can maybe pick one and comment on it. Of course, AI is big, and there's a whole battle about that, and the resources that it's going to take. The No King marches took place. Charlie Kirk was murdered. Trump, with all these executive orders and billionaire backers, we hit that a little bit. The Houthis in Yemen actually warded off, I think, a U.S. attack, although they won't say that. Iran was attacked by Israel in the U.S., but they maintained. The Jeffrey Epstein files, Kendrick Lamar's Super Bowl performance last year was somewhat controversial to many because of his symbolism in that performance. The draconian immigration policies, rapid support forces sieged the Sudanese El Fasher city. The Ukraine war continues. U.S. is bombing Venezuelan ships and pirating tankers. And Zohran Mamdani wins the election. So there's a few things that are happening. You want to pick one and comment on it?
Boy, where to start?
I know, I'm sorry. I shouldn't throw it all at you.
Yeah, I'll just say a couple words about Venezuela. I want to talk about, the war on immigrants, which is really a war on all of us. Um, and we can keep going from there. But, in Venezuela, as I understand it, this was reported by Max Blumenthal yesterday. Or I guess it was the day before, 10% of the US Navy now is sitting outside of Venezuela. And apparently they are not succeeding in blockading it. And they've even chased at least one oil tanker, which I think proclaimed that it was under a Russian flag.
Right.
And there was like a standoff, and the Venezuelans won. Not a shot fired, but it's like you've got these armchair warriors now running our foreign policy, and they're quick to drop bombs, but do they actually know what they're talking about? No, absolutely not. They justify this war on Venezuela by the supposed drug cartels that are
Lies. Everybody knows
supposedly
it's a
in
lie.
charge. It is absolutely ridiculous. You want to talk about drug cartels? Talk about the what was it? The former Honduran president who was just released from jail. That's where the drug running is, and yet Don, our country is working with them. We work closely with the Noboa administration in El Salvador, about which there is enormous evidence of their corruption and their immersion in the drug trade. So, our government is guilty as not charged, and the whole notion that you have fentanyl supposedly coming from Venezuela is false, and there is like zero evidence to support that. So it's like made up to start with. They have to sink all the boats that they attack because they don't dare allow the evidence to be examined. They kill all survivors so that no one can be interviewed from these attacks. It's such a mega fraud and a scam. It's just, it's utterly shameful what's going on with Venezuela. And it seems to be that the U.S. may, in fact, be backing down, according to the kind of up-to-date reporting from the gray zone, which is very interesting.
Yeah, the
And
Gray Zone has really been putting out some information. And one of the reasons I believe is because Russia has sent them missiles to defend themselves.
okay,
Uh,
well, yeah,
but we don't hear that. But I've heard it. But that won't be substantiated in the U.S. media because they don't want you to know that if they try to attack it, they have help. We know that that China put a lot of money into Venezuelan oil, and one of those ships I think was headed toward China when it was stopped.
that's right. Yes. And then I think there was another one that just happened like 2 days ago where it was being pursued by the Coast Guard, but the Coast Guard actually did not board and they didn't attack the ship, and the ship went on its way. So it's kind of, you know, this is not the way to conduct a foreign policy. This is not the way to be part of a multipolar world, which is what we are
This
now.
is imperialism 101. Period.
Totally. Yes, unapologetic
Yeah.
Monroe Doctrine being applied in our hemisphere, but actually it's being applied all around the world, where the US is now also bombing Nigeria. What does Nigeria have in common with Venezuela? They both happen to have a whole lot of oil.
Oh,
So,
what you say?
yeah, could that be the method behind this madness? So yeah, it's completely outrageous what's going on that front. And the American people oppose this. The people of Venezuela, even those who aren't fans of Maduro, they also oppose this, except for Maria, whatever her name is,
Oh my goodness.
the Nobel War Prize winner, who's inviting the U.S. corporations to please come in, and she would oversee that. She herself doesn't really have a base in Venezuela.
Yeah.
So, it's absolutely indefensible and criminal what's going on in Venezuela, and it's very clearly part of a very long, ongoing effort to unseat socialist governments around
Thank
the
you.
world
I
and
think
to
what you
stop
said was
support
key.
for Cuba.
Socialist. Yes.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
right. And
Socialist government.
Absolutely. And especially Cuba, in the
Yeah.
hopes that, preventing Venezuela's oil from getting to Cuba, maybe that will help topple the Cuban government. It's just,
818-985-5735. Hit option one. We have some callers. We'll get to you in the second callers. We're talking to Dr. Jill Stein, and shortly we're going to go to Nefta Freeman. We talked about Nigeria, and they were bombed. Uh, I'd like to say, every time they do something, they being the United States government. For instance, in Cuba, we talked about Cuba. It was Fidel Castro who was this draconian dictator who was terrible to the people. So they always want to label you. So Fidel Castro was just terrible. When they invaded Libya, Gaddafi, oh, he's this terrible dictator. And anybody who would talk about it would always start off with that, well, he's this terrible dictator. Now we see it always happens. Now in Venezuela, oh, he's this terrible dictator. Although I had some people, knew some people who went to Venezuela when they had some elections. I think might have been his first election, he being Maduro. And they said they monitored it. They had people go down there and they monitored it. So it was fair. It was fair. They had backup. But we get a different narrative here. These are terrible people. And we're not saying that they're great, but let them be them.
right. I mean, how does he compare to MBS, who in, the prince, the crown prince in Saudi Arabia,
Oh,
or the so-called president of Syria, formerly of Al Qaeda. These are governments that we roll out the red carpet for. That we have exchanges at the highest levels of government with. Clearly this kind of labeling as dictator is politically motivated in order to basically do a resource grab. Among the other topics you mentioned, I want to at least give a quick a thought or two about, ICE and the attack on immigrants, which is, utterly horrific and an example of the kind of fascist policing that the Black community has long been victim of. We're seeing that much more broadly now. As terrible as it is, remember that it's like a couple 100,000 migrants that have been deported this year. Under Obama, it was close to 1 million in his first year. So
what they
let's
call him, the
just
chief and deporter, I think they called him. Go ahead.
exactly, that's right. So let's be clear, this is a bipartisan problem. And what is most amazing here, the criminality and the violence of ICE as they, use tear gas on peaceful protesters, as they attack people, as they rip children out of the arms of their mothers. What's really amazing is how communities have rallied with incredible courage and fearlessness all over the country. We see thousands of people coming out. We see community protection. We see alert networks and know your rights trainings and accompaniments to the immigration hearings and so on. The way that people have fearlessly stood up and pushed back is amazing. And there was just a very important court decision, I think it was yesterday or the day before,
Right.
a court decision that said that Trump cannot
Right.
send in the National Guard. So this is a huge victory, and I think the public deserves a lot of credit here because the judiciary, they're taking a big risk too by standing up to do the right thing, and for the public to be leading the way is really wonderful. And I think if we were to generalize about the year, it's that the empire, the bipartisan, duopoly, and its empire and its oligarchy are doubling down with AI as well, for example. They're doubling down, but the people are rising up. And the empire is really teetering at the brink. It's on its last legs here. It's losing ground economically, militarily. We haven't won a major war since Vietnam, and we are spending out. We're totally depleting our scarce tax dollars in order to conduct these wars to enrich basically the AI industry, and the surveillance industry and the Palantirs, and the weapons profiteers. We're enriching them. It's absolutely unsustainable as we impose this devastating austerity. Household debt is at absolutely unprecedented levels. Half of American households are struggling to keep a roof over their heads. Let me just point to healthcare for a second, because while you saw the Democrats scream a little bit at the end of the day, they caved. They caved on just maintaining the ACA. They should have been fighting like hell for healthcare as a human right. That would be saving us up to $1 trillion every year we would be saving if we moved to cover everybody and just cut out the predatory middleman. So if you're struggling to keep your healthcare or to get healthcare, remember that there's a solution here. California could have solved this problem with its bipartisan, it's democratic, I should say, like bicameral. The House, the legislature in California is thoroughly democratic, and they could have implemented it. They could have overridden a gubernatorial veto, but they don't. They advocate for it when they're not in power. And I want to mention one thing, which is that in the upcoming governor's race, if you haven't heard, there is an amazing Green candidate, Butch Ware, who was my running mate. I had the honor to run with him in the last election. And he stands for what it is that people want.
Right. We had him on the program.
Oh, great. All right,
Yes,
terrific.
we have to get him back. Go ahead. Keep
Yeah, well, he is in this, what they call a jungle primary. The primary election is not separated by party. So all the Democrats, and there's a whole mob of them, a mob of very centrist, corporate captured Democrats, which is what the Democratic Party is, with very few exceptions. They're all competing with each other, and they're all basically in single digits, barely one or two. I think they're leading candidates, the likes of Katie Porter, who was caught on camera abusing her staff. The best that they can do is 11 or 12%. Butch has recognition even before he's been covered, which is astounding. And there are so many people now, if you look at the national polls, the biggest sector of the electorate is independent and disavows both the Democratic and the Republican Party, which is why, as you were saying, Sylvester, earlier, what they try to do is silence their opposition. Because if the opposition gets to the microphone, they are terrified that we will win. This is what Malcolm X said. We are not outnumbered. We are out-organized. And as Alice Walker said, the biggest way people give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. So I would just make the point, don't let them intimidate you out of our power, especially in a race like in California's. And I encourage people to go out and canvass, go knock on doors, go make phone calls for Butch Ware. If you want healthcare as a human right, if you want to end the madness in Gaza and Palestine, and you want to recoup this 50% of our discretionary dollars that are spent killing people, instead they need to be spent on housing and healthcare here. If you want rent control, if you want social housing, all those things that we actually can have, all you got to do is vote for it, and we actually have the potential. If Butch can get into that number 2 slot, there are some Republicans running, but they don't have support and they are unknown. So if Butch can get into the number 2 slot, he then will be the focus. And by the way, he's already been admitted into the final televised debates before the primary.
That's what I'm talking
Yes,
about. See, that visibility is what gets us over. That's what they
it
try.
is totally.
That's why I think you did, when you went on to the Breakfast Club,
Right.
that visibility propelled you because people didn't know.
They didn't have a clue. And after that, the Democrats really doubled down
Yes, they did.
to silence us because they were terrified. If you read the comments on the Breakfast Club live stream and the video that was, I think it's still online now, amazingly, knock on wood, they haven't taken it down yet. But if you read the comments, it's full. It's like 20,000 comments, like last I saw, where people were saying not only, they didn't know about Butch and my ticket, but now they were not only going to vote for us, they were going to go out and register green, that this is what, people power is all about. And it really is. And it really does give us an incredible, golden opportunity to fight back, knowing that, in fact, we do have the power. We could turn this around, and California really could be the breakthrough place for this to happen.
2025, and many of us are still alive. Let's go to caller number 1-818-985-5735. This is calling one. Then we'll go to an update on the bombing in Nigeria. Caller, what's your question for Dr. Jill Stein?
My question has to do with, as a media psychologist, one of the first things you learn is that whomever controls the information sets the agenda. They might not control how you think, but they do control what we think about. My concern is primarily with DEI because of our children.
Mm-hmm.
Research shows that when children watch television, the group that benefits are white boys. Everyone else, the more they watch TV, there's a commensurate decline in their self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
So now that DEI is being eliminated, I'm wondering what is going to happen and how can we reverse that?
Okay. Go ahead, Dr. Stein.
Very well said. And, I think DEI is sort of a symbol of what's going on, because you have not only the destruction of policies that are intended to lift up marginalized communities and to tell the real story and the real history instead of this kind of racist version of reality. But along with that, you have the withdrawal of funding for the SNAP program. So these are the kids who are being denied their history and their affirmation. At the same time, they're being denied food and they're being denied housing. And it's like everything is kind of converging around them. This is not going to work. And this is why, in my view, we're seeing a really courageous and principled pushback and an uprising. And you're seeing Trump's numbers in the polls crash and burn. You're also seeing the approval rate for both the Democratic and the Republican Party at all-time lows. And you're seeing the hunger for, as you point out, another agenda. We're seeing that hunger for another agenda at record highs. So I think as really horrific as things have been, the hope right now is where the power is. We do have the power, and people are mobilizing like we haven't seen before. I mean, people have been mobilized before, but now it's really breaking over into political mobilization as well. And yeah, a lot of people came out for No Kings, but a lot of people are going beyond the agenda of No Kings, which really didn't have an agenda. We really need a fighting agenda. We need to shut down these outrageous military expenditures that are delivering genocide, not only in Gaza, but in the DRC and in Sudan, by way of our support for the UAE, which is, it's our weapons that are working their way into Sudan as well and driving the genocide there.
Our weapons.
Our weapons are weapons.
I hate to say their weapons, because
their weapons. That's right. It's not us.
And 818. Let's go ahead.
Yeah, and we do have the power to shut that down. So I want to say to the caller, know your power. You know, as Alice Walker said, biggest way we give up power is by not knowing we have it to start with. And don't allow yourself to be marginalized into asking for window dressing. As Martin Luther King said, you know, you've got this triple evil of militarism, racism, and extreme materialism, aka capitalism. You can't fix them separately. We really need a system change here because we're going down fast right
I
now.
like that. System change is what we
We need
need.
a system change, totally.
So,
And that's fundamentally political.
Speaking of that, there was a bombing in Nigeria on Christmas Day for another bogus reason, just like in Venezuela, just like basically everywhere. There's really no justified reason for going and taking over these countries. They just lie. But Nefta Freeman is with the Black Alliance for Peace, and he's going to join us for a second here. Jill, give us your update on that. What are you saying about this? And you know, me being of African American descent, it's like very problematic. Why are you? And I know Nigerians going in there and blowing up people. Netfa, how are you?
Well, good morning, Sylvester. Good morning, Jill. Good to be here. Appreciate it for this time. So let's cut to the chase, as we
That's
say.
right.
And so on Christmas Day, you know, the December 25th, the U.S. Launched an airstrike in Nigeria on that's the northern border
You're
of
right.
Nigeria, bordering with Niger. Well, kind of and is it Niger? And under the pretext, and we're talking about an operation of the U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM, and Black Alliance for Peace has a campaign against AFRICOM. U.S. out of Africa shut down AFRICOM. It exposed the fact that there's a crisis of sovereignty, you know, on the African continent, and this crisis is not something that just started with this airstrike, or even recently. It's been an ongoing issue. It's part of it's a manifestation of neocolonialism. You can't have neocolonialism, which means basically the continuation of imperialism on the continent of Africa, doing away with or struggling and transcending traditional colonialism, but morphing into and adapting with neocolonialism. And AFRICOM is a manifestation of that. It's the U.S.'s means. It's a structure for the U.S. to administer just one structure for the U.S. and the Western powers to keep Africa colonized. And so the pretext that the Trump administration used was to protect Christians and the massacring and the repression of Christians by ISIL, the jihadists or violent jihadist extremist groups that they actually really have a hand in creating in Africa. And this is basically, it's a, you know, you guys, a mustering or how are you going to say, the manifestation and of the Trump administration and their ilk and their inclinations around like Christian, you know, evangelicals, and which actually were lobbying for this type of intervention. They're lobbying for the Trump administration to intervene in places like Africa, and places where they're claiming there's
That's local
Christian.
evangelicals, not in Nigeria, correct?
No, not in Nigeria. I'm sorry. That's correct.
And
Thank
let me
you
just
for
say
that.
this, because our time is going so far. Let me ask you this, because you mentioned that, I think I read an article that you did, that they said that they were invited, but you said that you don't believe that's true. They, being the United States, was invited to do the bombing.
Well, I don't know. We doubt that it's true. The article, it's a statement that by the Black Alliance for Peace, and it's on blackallianceforpeace.com. The Nigerian government has approved of it and says is endorsing it and is embracing it as a part of their cooperative fight against terrorism in Africa, and these terrorists. But all evidence points to that's not, they didn't invite them. They just kind of signed on to it. Neo-colonial government and puppet government in Nigeria would do this. They're concerned also with the aggressive claims that the Trump administration has said about coming in and doing what they will about the persecution of Christians. And then it really is, all of this speaks to more insidious U.S. and Western, what we refer to the U.S., EU, NATO axis of domination, their interest, which we see playing out in other ways too. on the African continent.
And I realized, I think either you or Jill mentioned it, that Niger is on the border of Nigeria. And of course,
Right.
if people who don't know, there's three so-called Sahel states that have kicked out, let me say that again, kicked out the French, the Americans, and they created a collaboration militarily. So that's interesting that they would bomb
Well,
close to that border.
it's actually more than a military alliance, the alliance of Sahel states, from Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali at this, and we can see it actually developing into much more, which we even a few days before the U.S. strike, the Alliance of Sahel States announced a unified military security force,
Few
which
days
was
before the
a few
strike.
days,
Okay.
in addition to a number of other things. Now, the alliance came together, as you said, as a security alliance to protect the sovereignty of what they've created. But they've been doing all kind of things, taking control of the resources and renegotiating the mineral wealth. They just started a TV station. They held a summit. That was part of this military launch. And then right now, with the U.S. is involved, and they're involved in leading a visa war, where the United States is claiming to deny visas from different African countries, deny people under some kind of security pretext. And it was the Alliance of Sahel States, led by Burkina Faso, that said, well, we're going to tit for tat for that. U.S. people can't come in here. You don't get unfettered access to our country, and you're going to deny us. And so, while that may have a little effect on the United States, it's the fact that they're standing up and asserting their dignity and sovereignty. This is important. And so, and we think that it's pretty clear that the strike was not so much about, it was definitely, we know it wasn't about protecting no Christians, because they don't care about any life like that. There's Palestinian Christians that are being subjected to
Most
genocide
people
in
being
Gaza.
killed were Muslim anyway. Go ahead.
Right. And so the fact that on the Sokoto border, like you mentioned, it's right borders Niger, and the fact that they cannot afford for a unified military force to actually gain some success in fighting back these terrorists. They want to claim their whole thing since AES started was they're going to suffer from, since AES kicked them out,
If
that they're going
indeed
to regret it, because we need the West to come in and protect
if
us from it.
indeed that's their goal. But let's do this. We got to move on. Dr. Stein, do you want to comment on that? And then we're going to go to another caller's question.
I'll just thank Nefta and the Black Alliance for Peace for being vigilant, especially in areas of foreign policy like Africa, where the U.S. media won't touch it with a 10-foot
They don't touch it.
All we hear is their Department of Defense talking points propaganda,
Right.
and it's just so beautiful, to hear your analysis, because I wasn't putting it together in my mind either, that you have this, this alliance of Burkina Faso and Mali and Niger, and Nigeria is right on the border. So this is how U.S. foreign policy works. Establish your military bases, and surround areas where the U.S. feels like they don't have their full spectrum dominance, and they feel threatened. So this is the U.S., doing its usual, program to fight people's movements and justice and democracy. So thank you so much for the work that you do, and it's really great to have you here sharing this with us.
We're going to take a caller question, and then we're going to look forward to possibilities of the future in 2026. Caller, you're on the line with Dr. Jill Stein, and we're actually joined by Nefta Freeman. Go ahead. What's your question?
Hello.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, this is Juliet. And happy Kwanzaa and happy New Year's to all of you. I don't know if this is.
You need to cut your radio down. I hear something in the background. Cut that down, please, or cut it off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, that's better. Okay, go ahead quickly. We're running out of time so fast. So what's your question, please?
Yes, my question is, can someone from the media put a call to action out there about our loved ones in prison? I'm not trying to be funny, but I'm talking about specifically our black young brothers in prison. And one of my cousins died from doing 39 years, and he was getting ready to get released. The other ones are youngsters that have been in jail because they were 16 and 17 years old, and they still are. They're being harassed and they're being outnumbered.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for the question. That is a part of what's happening in 2025, the ongoing incarceration of people, specifically people of color. I did not say that in my different topics, but that is an ongoing crisis in the United States, the incarcerating of and political prisoners. I think it was this year that we got Leonard Pelletier was released. So that is crucial.
And Mumia was not, and should be. Mumia and thousands upon thousands of other, political prisoners who are in jail because of poverty, and because they didn't have the lawyers that they needed to get out of a system that was basically framing them from the get-go. So thank you, Julia, for making that point. That's absolutely critical. And this too, it's a horrific problem. And much of it dates back to under the Clinton administration when you had this so-called criminal reform bill, this omnibus criminal reform bill, so-called, that just created drastic sentencing and racial, just a tragedy.
Exactly. Let me read this. As a 32-year-old senator in 1975, Biden commented, "I do not buy the concept popular in the 60s, which said we have suppressed the black man for 300 years, and the white man is now far ahead in the race for everything our society offers. In order to even the score, we must now give the black man a head start or even hold the white man back to even the race." I don't buy that. That's Joe Biden.
But it's important that we see mass incarceration and how the judicial system works as an extension, as a manifestation of counterinsurgency and the war against
we got 2 minutes. I don't believe this. I do not believe it. So, Jill, give me your possibilities of 2026.
Yeah, well, I'll just say we have to fire on all cylinders and not take a no for an answer and not accept the propaganda that we're marginal. We're not marginal. We have the majority of the numbers, as Malcolm X said. We're not outnumbered, we're just out-organized. And we need to organize the hell out of our lives on every front of struggle and don't rule out a general strike. We're seeing general strikes now. In Italy, led by the dock workers union, who are refusing to load weapons for genocide. And this is happening all around the Mediterranean. The Brazilian workers, fossil fuel workers, actually refuse to send fuel there. And they have basically eliminated the Brazilian fossil fuel support for Israel. That should be like a microcosm of what we have to do.
You have like 30 seconds.
Yeah, go ahead, Nefta, give us your
I
thoughts.
agree. I mean, I can make it short. I agree with you, and that we should see ourselves, those of us impressed in the U.S., are part of the global South. So we're not alone. We're the majority, also because we part of the rest of the world that needs to, has the same enemy and the same goals.
I hope to have y'all back if y'all don't mind.
I'd love to, yeah.
Okay, so this has been I don't believe we're out of time. Cut to the chase. My name is Sylvester Rivers. You were listening to Jill Stein and Nefta Freeman talking about 2025 and the possibilities of 2026. See y'all next week at 8 a.m.